Serena Vale was torn away from her own painting before hundreds of collectors when Vescarian forces presented a death note bearing her dead father's signature. Don Dante Moretti stopped them by purchasing that note for $10 million, making the full-figured art dealer's freedom his first acquisition of the evening. Yet Dante had come to the Bella Court exhibition for the Veiled Saint, a masterpiece his murdered mother had catalogued before vanishing from the art world. Serena whispered that someone had replaced its original frame that morning, and beneath the new backing waited a blue mark only Moretti blood should recognize. Dante did not look at the blue mark for long. One glance was enough to drain the last warmth from his angular face. He turned toward the two men holding Serena, and the room seemed to contract around the quiet authority in his voice. "The note is mine, she is not. Let her go." Their hands released her at once. Serena caught herself against the velvet rope surrounding the Veiled Saint, breathing through the ache in her arms. Her emerald gown had twisted at one shoulder. Dante removed his midnight black jacket and held it out without touching her, giving her the choice to take it. Dense black and gray tattoos climbed from his hands beneath his open collar. But his restraint unsettled her more than the ink. She accepted the jacket because every camera in the ballroom was pointed at her. "Buying a forged note does not make you my rescuer." "No," he said, "it makes their excuse for putting you in a car belong to me." Carlo Vescari stood near the Champagne Tower, silver-haired and immaculate, watching his men retreat. He had not signed the note himself. He had sent representatives wearing Bella Court security pins, trusting humiliation to do what open violence could not among senators, collectors, and museum trustees. Serena faced the auctioneer. "This exhibition remains open. No lot moves until I verify every seal." The auctioneer glanced toward Vescari before lowering his eyes. That tiny surrender told Serena how deeply the evening had been compromised. She crossed to the masterpiece. The newly installed black lacquer frame looked convincing from a distance. Yet the mitre joints were too clean, and the gilded inner lip carried no dust from the old linen liner. Dante approached, stopping beyond arm's reach. "Why did you notice the replacement now?" "Because your men interrupted my examination. They are not my men." She studied him, then pointed beneath the lower rail. A blue crescent, no larger than a thumbnail, stained the backing paper. That pigment was discontinued decades ago. "Your mother used it to mark works she had personally catalogued. I saw the same formula in her archived condition reports." Something tightened in his jaw. "You read Lucia Moretti's reports?" "I bought my father's gallery, including its debts and records. I read everything." Dante produced the note he had purchased. Serena recognized her father's looping signature. But the paper was bright where it should have yellowed, and the embossed seal pressed too sharply through the fibers. She also saw a small object stapled beneath the folded corner. Dante removed it carefully and placed it in her palm. It was Gabriel Vale's brass signet, scratched along one edge from years of opening paint crates. Serena had searched for it after his death. The intimate weight of it nearly broke the composure she had held beneath the chandeliers. "Vescari used this to make the forgery feel true," Dante said. "It belongs to you." He could have kept it as leverage. Instead, he closed her fingers around it and stepped back. For the first time that night, Serena saw not possession in his eyes, but recognition of a grief he knew too well. The lights died. Glass shattered near the west wall. Guests screamed, chairs scraped, and emergency lamps flooded the ballroom in low red light. Serena turned toward the Veiled Saint. Its hanging cables swayed against an empty rectangle of silk wallpaper. The painting was gone. Serena forced herself to remember the final seconds before darkness. The assistant auctioneer had moved left. A waiter had dropped a tray near the south doors. And Vescari had never looked toward the painting. He had looked toward the ceiling camera above the service corridor. She told Dante, who asked Bella Corte to preserve the camera system before anyone could erase it. The recorder showed a maintenance login issued under Adrian's credentials 30 seconds before the blackout. It was not proof that Adrian had acted willingly, but it fixed the theft to a deliberate action and gave them a route to follow. Serena tucked her father's signet into the inner pocket of Dante's jacket and pulled the torn velvet closed. Grief could wait. The people who had turned her profession into a weapon were still inside the building. Serena did not chase the nearest shadow, a canvas that old could not be rolled without damage, and the service elevator required a freight key. Whoever had taken it needed a rigid carrier, 2 people, and a route prepared before the blackout. She crouched beside the empty hooks. Pale crumbs of conservation wax dotted the carpet, leading away from the public doors toward a staff corridor. Dante's security chief, Marco Rinaldi, appeared with 3 men, but Serena raised a hand. "Too many feet will erase the trail." Dante ordered everyone back. He did not ask why she knew. He watched her work. Serena followed the crumbs beyond the catering station, where a Bellacourt porter lay conscious but dazed. His master key was missing. At the freight elevator, the wax trail stopped, yet a faint line of grey dust marked the opposite wall. "They want us to think they went down," she said. "This dust is pumice from the temporary conservation room. It's upstairs." Marco took the stairs while Dante stayed beside her. Serena resented the protection and was grateful for it in equal measure. On the mezzanine, they found the conservation room locked from within. The climate controls hummed at maximum extraction, powerful enough to pull solvent fumes through the ceiling vents. Serena entered the override sequence used by visiting conservators. The door opened on 2 masked men, sliding the veiled saint into a travel case. One rushed her. She stepped behind a steel work table and slammed the emergency ventilation lever. A clear vinyl curtain dropped between the wet treatment station and the door, tangling the attacker long enough for Serena to shove the table into his knees. Dante moved with brutal economy. He struck the second man once, caught his wrist before a knife slid the sheath, and drove him against the padded wall. Marco arrived seconds later and restrained both. No gunfire. No heroic miracle, only preparation, leverage, and the building's own safety equipment. Serena checked the painting before herself. A shallow scrape crossed the backing board, but the canvas remained intact. The substitute frame, however, was gone. The thieves had removed it and abandoned the painting they had supposedly come to steal. "They wanted the frame," Dante said, "or something inside it." One captive bit through a poison capsule before anyone could stop him. The other stayed silent, his shoulder dislocated and his eyes fixed on the floor. Marco found a hotel access card issued to a shell contractor controlled by Vescari, but that proved only the present attack. Serena lifted the painting beneath raking light. On the back of the original stretcher, partly exposed by the scrape, lay a second blue crescent and 3 narrow diagonal lines. Dante stared as though he had been returned to a room from childhood. "My mother marked disputed custody that way," he said. "She believed someone inside my family was moving stolen art through Moretti docks." Serena remembered the morning installation. Adrian Pike, her assistant registrar, had insisted on supervising the frame change after a courier reported humidity damage. He alone had carried the old frame away. Her stomach tightened. Adrian had worked beside her for 5 years. He knew every collector, every storage code, and every promise she had made to protect her father's name. She reached for her phone. His contact had vanished from the staff directory, and the location signal on his company device ended 40 minutes before the gala. Adrian had not been abducted. He had opened the door. The surviving thief carried no identification, only a strip of archival foam cut from the old frame's travel cradle. Serena recognized her own handwriting on its edge. She had labeled the material during a condition survey 3 months earlier. Adrian had therefore prepared the switch using supplies from Vale Gallery. Long before the gala invitation list became public, the discovery hurt more than the bruises on her arms. He had shared late dinners with Maya, remembered Serena's father's birthday, and once slept on the gallery floor during a roof leak. Dante did not tell her she should have known. He ordered the foam sealed as evidence and asked which storage cabinet it came from. The practical question steadied her. Betrayal might be personal, but tracing it required discipline. Dante moved Serena to a secured Bellacourt suite while police took statements below. The officers treated the incident as private security misconduct until the unconscious porter identified the forged uniforms. Dante's influence could open doors, but he made no claim that his $10 million purchase was lawful. In court, the note was worthless. In the underworld, it had stopped Vescarius' men because refusing a debt transfer witnessed by 3 families would begin a war. Serena stood at the suite window in Dante's jacket while a hotel seamstress repaired her gown in the adjoining room. "You cannot keep me here. I can keep Vescari from reaching you tonight." "That was not my sentence." He met her stare. "The elevator is unlocked. 2 cars are ready. Choose your destination, and my people will take you there. Walk out alone, and I want to stop you." The answer took some of the fight from her because it returned the choice he had seemed to purchase. She chose to stay long enough to understand why a dead woman's mark had appeared beneath her painting. Dante opened a weathered leather folio. Lucia Moretti's private catalogue contained photographs, dimensions, restoration notes, and terse symbols in blue pigment. The entry for the veiled saint ended with a sentence written 3 weeks before her death. "Gabriel believes the frame remembers what men deny." Serena traced the handwriting without touching it. "My father never mentioned her." "Mine stopped mentioning everyone after she died." Dante's voice remained controlled, but he turned Lucia's wedding ring around his little finger, where it hung from a thin black cord. "I was 14. I believed my uncle when he said Vescari ordered the killing, and your father disappeared with the proof." "My father did not disappear. He rebuilt a failing gallery and spent 20 years paying debts he refused to explain." They compared the forged note with documents from Lucia's folio. Serena found the same grammatical error in an old Vescari shipping declaration. "Pigment ground," where any trained dealer would write ground pigment. The phrasing connected the forger to a historic network, though it did not identify the hand behind it. Her phone rang from a restricted number. Maya Chen, the gallery's registrar, spoke quickly. Adrian had used Serena's credentials to schedule a frame pickup by North Star Fine Art Logistics. Maya had blocked the truck when its barcode failed. So Adrian moved the frame into the gallery's basement quarantine room and left through the alley. Minutes later, the building alarm reported a water leak. "It's a diversion," Serena said. "If sprinklers activate, the quarantine locks release for firefighters." Dante was already reaching for his coat. "Then we go. Now we?" He placed Lucia's folio in her hands. Trust flickered beneath the sternness of his expression. "You can identify what they changed. I can make sure you live long enough to do it." Serena looked at the ring on its cord. "Your mother trusted my father, and someone made both families pay for it." She returned the folio, rather than keeping the leverage. Dante noticed neither called the exchange what it was, the first deliberate act of trust between them. Downstairs, Marco reported that North Star's truck had been traced to a warehouse leased by a Moretti waterfront company. The theft route led not only to Vescari, but into Dante's own house. Before leaving the suite, Serena changed back into the repaired gown and returned Dante's jacket. He accepted it without comment, then noticed that she had kept the brass signet. "Good," he said, as if he had feared she might abandon the last imperfect piece of her father. In the elevator, he told her that Enzo had raised him after Lucia's death and had negotiated the truce that made Dante head of the family at 29. Accusing him without proof would fracture that truce. Serena understood the warning beneath the confession. If she was wrong, Dante could lose his organization. If she was right, he could lose the man who had become his father. She did not promise certainty. She promised only that every conclusion would have to survive examination by someone who wanted it to be false. Rain glazed the streets by the time they reached Vale Gallery. Maya waited behind the security glass with a fire extinguisher and the stubborn fury of a woman guarding more than inventory. The leak alarm had been triggered remotely. No pipe had burst. Because she had refused to open the quarantine room, the old frame was still inside, or what looked like it. Serena changed into black trousers, a cream blouse, and low shoes from the emergency wardrobe she kept at work. She examined the frame on padded blocks. The carved acanthus pattern matched photographs, but the wood was young poplar beneath artificial staining. The original had been 18th century oak, a second substitute, she said. Adrian placed this here so we would stop searching. Maya produced pickup records and surveillance stills. Adrian had rolled the genuine frame through the alley in a crate labeled for a sculpture loan. North Star's barcode belonged to an older Vale account, one Gabriel had closed 6 months before his death. Dante's hand tightened around the crate photograph. That warehouse belongs to Moretti Harbor Services. My uncle Enzo controls its night cruise. Before they could leave, a stone shattered the front window. Dante pulled Serena down as a second projectile struck the wall. It was not a bullet, but a steel conservation weight wrapped in paper. Marco's men secured the street while Serena unfolded the blank side of the wrapper. On the inside was a photograph of Gabriel, kneeling beside Lucius' wrecked car. Vescari called her directly. "Your father watched a mother die," he said. "Bring me the painting and the Moretti catalogue by midnight, or every museum will receive the rest." Serena's instinct was to defend Gabriel. Instead, she asked, "If the photograph proves murder, why do you need a frame?" Silence lasted half a beat too long. Then Vescari ended the call. Dante had heard through the speaker. Old rage sharpened his stillness, but he did not accuse her. "You challenge the part of his story that makes no sense." "My father may have made terrible choices. I won't invent innocence for him." A splinter of glass had cut Dante's palm when he pulled her down. Serena cleaned it at the restoration sink. He could have ordered an aide to do it, yet he stood quietly while she removed the shard and wrapped his tattooed hand. Up close, she saw the discipline required to hold 20 years of anger without letting it decide for him. "If we find proof Gabriel betrayed her," he asked, "I will face it, and if Enzo did." The bandage paused between her fingers. "Will you?" His gaze did not move. "I don't know." It was the first honest weakness he had shown her, more meaningful than a promise. Serena fastened the bandage and stepped away. She unlocked Gabriel's closed account archive. His final conservation note described an oak frame with a removable lower rail and a brass corner repaired after flood damage. Beside the entry was a warning: "Never open outside controlled humidity." Silver film inside. The genuine frame held physical evidence, vulnerable to moisture and heat. The photograph had been a threat, but the midnight deadline concerned destruction. Dante offered Serena a protected apartment and a car out of the city. "You can leave. I will continue without you." She looked around the gallery her father had built from fear, debt, and stubborn hope. "No, my name opened the route. My knowledge will close it." On the warehouse photograph, Maya enlarged a reflection in the truck window. Adrian sat in the passenger seat beside Enzo Moretti. Maya also found that Adrian had requested access to Gabriel's closed account 4 times during the previous month. Each request cited insurance renewal. A plausible reason that had escaped notice because the gallery was preparing 37 loans for Bellacourt. Serena saw how her own exhaustion had helped him. She had approved 2 requests without reading the attachments and delegated the others. The failure was not secret incompetence. It was a recognizable management mistake under pressure. She amended the evidence log herself and told Maya not to erase her approvals. Dante watched her preserve facts that could embarrass her. "Most people edit the record when power gives them the chance," he said. Serena closed the archive. Then power should not be trusted with the only copy. Moretti Harbor Services operated openly by day and answered to older rules after dark. Dante could not storm his own warehouse without warning Enzo or splitting his captains. Serena proposed a lawful reason to enter. Vale Gallery still owned the crate listed on the false transfer, and Maya had already reported it stolen. A port investigator agreed to accompany them at dawn, but the silver film might not survive until then. They compromised. Serena scheduled an emergency condition inspection as the owner's representative. Dante entered as the leaseholder's family principal, while Marco kept a small team beyond the loading bay. Their access was real, their protection was not unlimited. Inside, rows of art crates stood among legitimate imports. Serena ignored the most obvious Vale labels. Adrian knew she would recognize them as bait. She searched for environmental inconsistencies instead. One crate sat beneath a heater, although its sensor claimed stable cold storage. The display had been taped over an older unit, and fresh sawdust gathered around one screw. "That one," she said. Dante checked the aisle. "Too easy, because it is supposed to punish me for being right." She should have waited for Marco. Pride and urgency overruled caution. Serena loosened the top clasp to test the seal. A tiny transmitter blinked beneath it, sending their position the instant the metals separated. The loading doors slammed down. Men emerged from behind stacked crates, not Vescari soldiers but Moretti dock workers loyal to Enzo. Dante pushed Serena behind a forklift as the first shots struck steel. Marco's team forced the side entrance, but the attackers had blocked the aisle with a moving container. Serena knew paintings, not gunfights. She did not pretend otherwise. She crawled to the forklift controls and lowered its raised pallet, creating a barrier Marco's men could cross. Dante covered the opening, taking a graze along his left shoulder before the attackers retreated through the river door. The decoy crate contained packing straw and a single brass corner from the genuine frame. Serena found a narrow cavity inside the fitting, lined with black paper, but empty. Someone had removed the silver film. "I triggered the tracker," she said, while Marco pressed gauze to Dante's shoulder. "I saw the trap and opened it anyway." Dante's face had gone pale beneath its composure, then learn from it. Guilt is useful only if it changes the next decision. He refused to let her minimize the wound. The bullet had furrowed muscle, but missed bone. A physician from the harbor clinic cleaned and stitched it, then immobilized his arm in a sling. Dante could walk and command, but he could not fight as if nothing had happened. While he was treated, Serena studied the brass corner. The inner paper held a faint rectangular impression. The film had remained there long enough to transfer handwritten pressure marks. Under oblique light, she made out 3 letters, EM, followed by a dock number. Enzo Moretti had managed Dock 9 in the year Lucia died. Marco brought the warehouse entry log. Enzo's credentials had opened the river door 20 minutes before Serena and Dante arrived. Only 4 people knew their destination, and Enzo had not been among them unless someone inside Dante's security circle had warned him. Dante ordered no purge. He narrowed communications, changed vehicles, and told Marco to investigate access calmly. His refusal to punish blindly impressed Serena more than violence would have. Then Dante's phone displayed a photograph sent from Enzo's private number. Adrian sat bound to a chair, his face bruised. Behind him hung the original oak frame. The message read, "Bring Serena and Lucia's catalogue to St. Aurelia Gallery. Come alone if you want the traitor alive." The physician advised Dante to remain under observation for 6 hours. He stayed for 1, long enough to receive antibiotics, imaging, and written restrictions. Serena argued that pain and blood loss could distort his judgment. Rather than dismiss her, he gave Marco authority to overrule him on physical security and asked Serena to control every decision involving the frame. The division mattered. Neither of them would be allowed to pretend competence in the other's field. Serena photographed the brass fragment at measured angles, sealed it in a padded box, and left the original with the port investigator. She would carry only the images into St. Aurelia. If Enzo took them, the evidence would remain outside his reach. St. Aurelia Gallery had belonged to the Moretti family before Dante converted it into a private archive. Enzo chose it because he controlled the old security system, and because Lucia had once worked there. Dante refused to deliver Serena, but Serena refused to be excluded from a negotiation built around her expertise. They entered through separate routes. Marco monitored from a neighboring building, while Maya remained at Vale Gallery with digital copies of the pickup records. Dante wore a fresh black shirt beneath his sling. Serena carried Lucia's catalogue in a waterproof case and left the veiled saint secured in the Bellacorte vault. Enzo waited beneath a dark skylight with Adrian and the genuine frame. He was 60, elegant and tired enough to resemble a man burdened by truth. 4 guards controlled the exits. No one raised a weapon when Serena approached. "Adrian did not betray you for money," Enzo said. "He found evidence that Gabriel Vale caused Lucia's death. I asked him to save Dante from trusting the daughter of a murderer." Adrian lifted his swollen face. "He showed me the photograph and your father's account transfers. I thought the frame would prove it." Enzo placed copies of bank records on a table. Gabriel had received $200,000 from a Vescari company the week before Lucia died. The photograph showed him beside the wreck. The evidence was painful, coherent, and incomplete. Dante looked at Serena. His expression did not change, which made the distance in it worse. "Did you know about the payment?" "No. Your father's archive contains no matching statement." Enzo opened Lucia's catalogue to a missing page. Gabriel tore out her accusation. He took the film from the frame and let Vescari silence her. Serena examined the torn binding. The paper fibers were pale, not oxidized. The page had been removed recently. She could prove that to any conservator, but Dante's grief had already found the shape it feared. "Let me inspect the frame," she said. Enzo refused. Dante ordered his uncle to allow it. The two men faced each other across family history, and Enzo finally stepped aside. The oak was genuine. The repaired brass corner was missing, and the lower rail had been opened. Yet Serena found blue pigment trapped beneath an inner nail and a shallow slot longer than the film cavity in the brass. Her father had hidden more than one object. Enzo saw her notice. "Take her." Dante moved first, despite his injured shoulder, but Enzo's guards already had guns trained on Marco's hidden entry point. Dante could resist and get everyone killed, or surrender control. His error was quieter. He ordered Serena confined in an archive room while he negotiated, telling himself separation would protect her. The locked door felt like the death note all over again, another man deciding that safety excused possession. Serena used no secret weapon. She inspected the room. Decades of framed photographs hung on a rail system she knew from gallery installations. She removed a heavy backing board, slid its steel hanging cleat beneath the old door latch, and levered the loose strike plate from rotten wood. It took 12 painful minutes and left her palms raw. In the corridor, she heard Enzo offer Dante a bargain. Surrender the Moretti waterfront route, destroy Lucia's catalogue, and Serena could live. Then Adrian whispered from the stairwell. Enzo ordered the page torn yesterday. I watched him do it. He had finally understood that the evidence meant to save Dante had been manufactured for him from the office doorway. Serena could see Enzo replace the forged bank copies in a leather folder. One page carried a modern laser printer pattern, visible along the dark areas, impossible for a record supposedly produced 20 years earlier. The account numbers might still be real, but the presentation had been built to prevent questions. She photographed the page with a scale beside it and sent the image to Maya. Adrian then explained how Enzo had controlled his choices. First showing authentic payment data, then supplying the crash photograph, and only afterwards suggesting that Gabriel had murdered Lucia. Each true fragment made the unsupported conclusion feel earned. Serena recognized the method because fraudulent provenance worked the same way. A chain could contain many genuine links and still be attached to the wrong painting. Serena freed Adrian by cutting the plastic restraint against a brass frame hook. He admitted that Enzo had recruited him after Gabriel's death, using authentic fragments of the past to build a false conclusion. Adrian had switched the frame and shared access codes. He had not known the Gala removal would become an abduction. You knew enough, Serena said. He lowered his head. She did not forgive him. But she needed what he knew. Enzo had removed a narrow packet from the frame and placed it in Lucia's former office upstairs. Adrian had seen an old photograph and several shipping sheets. Not film. Serena sent Maya a voice message naming the office, the guards, and Enzo's demand. She did not ask for rescue. She asked Maya to send the forged pickup records to the port investigator if Serena failed to call within 20 minutes. She and Adrian climbed the service stair. In Lucia's office, Serena found the missing catalogue page beneath a blotter, its fresh tear matching the binding. Beside it lay the packet from the frame. A photograph of Lucia and Gabriel loading crates, 3 carbon shipping sheets, and a sealed letter addressed to Dante. Serena did not open the letter. It belonged to him. She photographed the other items, then recognized her father's penciled conservation notation on the packet. Duplicate lodged under St. Aurelia, Blue Room. The documents here were never meant to stand alone. Gabriel had built corroboration into 2 locations. An alarm sounded below. Dante had refused Enzo's terms. A guard entered the office, and Serena shoved the wheeled map cabinet into the doorway. Adrian braced it while she opened the restoration balcony, used to move oversized canvases. A powered cradle descended to the exhibition floor, but its controls required someone to remain above. Adrian stayed. I opened the first door. Let me close this one. Serena descended in the cradle with the packet. Halfway down, a guard cut the power. The platform stopped 9 feet above the floor. She tied the canvas straps into a loop, lowered herself until her shoes touched the top of a display wall, then climbed down its braced side. Her soft build made the movement slow and punishing, but the equipment carried her weight as designed. She reached the floor bruised, breathless, and standing. Dante was on his knees near the central table, held at gunpoint, his sling dark with reopened blood. Enzo faced him with Lucia's catalog in one hand and a lighter in the other. Serena stepped into view. "Burn it, and you destroy the only map to the duplicate." Enzo froze. He had searched the frame, but did not know Gabriel's notation system. Serena held the advantage because of her work, not luck. Dante looked at her with anger and relief contained behind his eyes. "I locked you away. We will discuss that if we survive." Marco's team breached the lower door as Maya's deadline reached the port investigator. Enzo's guards split between escape and defense. Dante used the distraction to knock the gun aside with his uninjured arm. Serena pulled the fire curtain, separating Enzo from two guards and opening a path to the street. Enzo escaped with the original frame, but he lost the packet and the forged narrative. Adrian was arrested with the surviving guards and immediately offered a full statement. Dante received new stitches in an ambulance while Serena sat across from him, holding Lucia's sealed letter. "You were right not to trust my protection," he said. "Protection without choice is another cage." He nodded once. "I want to make that mistake again." Serena handed him the letter inside. Lucia had written a single instruction. "If I fail, believe Gabriel when he tells you the enemy shares our name." Dante read the sentence twice, then asked the paramedic to place the letter in a transparent evidence sleeve. He did not press it to his heart or claim it absolved anyone. The paper's age, ink, and custody still required authentication. Serena appreciated that his hope did not suddenly erase the standards he had demanded from her. She recorded where the packet had been found, who had handled it, and the exact time it entered Marco's possession. Adrian signed the same account before police took him away. By sunrise, Lucia's letter was both a private message to a grieving son and an item whose truth would have to stand outside his desire to believe it. The Blue Room was not in St. Aurelia Gallery. Serena realized Gabriel's phrase referred to the Bellacorte exhibition walls, which had been painted a distinctive mineral blue during the year. Lucia catalogued the veiled saint. Renovation records showed that one original movable wall remained inside the hotel's art storage level. This time Serena did not rush. She shared the inference with Dante, Maya, Marco, and the port investigator. Bellacorte granted lawful access after learning its contractor badges had been forged. Dante remained under medical orders, his left arm secured, and accepted that limitation instead of pretending strength erased injury. Behind the old blue wall, Serena found a narrow conservation envelope fixed to the internal brace. Gabriel had placed it where renovation crews would preserve the panel as a historic fixture. Inside were duplicate carbon sheets matching those from the frame, a receipt for the Vescari payment, and Lucia's signed inventory summary. The payment had not purchased betrayal. Gabriel had accepted Vescari money to authenticate a shipment, then redirected it into a victim compensation account Lucia controlled. The carbon sheets documented stolen paintings moving through Dock 9 under Enzo's authorization. Lucia's summary identified irregular lots and named Gabriel as the cooperating witness. The evidence could dismantle an art smuggling route and destroy Enzo's standing, but it did not prove who ordered Lucia's death. The old photograph of Gabriel at the crash now looked different. He had arrived because she had asked him to follow her. Adrian's statement supplied the present conspiracy. Bellacorte records corroborated the forged pickup, the frame changes, and Enzo's direct instructions. Still, Enzo possessed the original frame and the missing silver film, which could contain the final record Lucia had hidden. Vescari sent a proposal. At midnight, he would exchange the frame and film for the veiled saint at the reopened Bellacorte exhibition. He demanded Dante attend without soldiers and Serena perform the authentication before representatives of 5 families. He believed their fear of scandal would keep police away. Serena proposed accepting with terms of her own. She would reopen the gala as a private provenance hearing, using the customs that governed disputed art among mafia collectors. No screens, theatrical confession, or last-minute miracle. Each side would present custody and witnesses. The families cared because fraudulent provenance threatened every collection they used to store wealth. Dante objected to placing her in the room again. Then he stopped himself. "What do you choose?" "I choose the room where they humiliated me," Serena said. "I choose the rules I understand." Her plan depended on a constraint Enzo could not escape. To sell or destroy the silver film safely, he had to know whether it was original. Only Lucia S. blue pigment and Serena S. archived reference samples could authenticate it without damaging it. If he brought a substitute, Serena would expose him. If he brought the original, the families would see it enter his custody. Maya prepared sealed copies of the Bellacourt and Vale records for the port investigator. Marco arranged unarmed Moretti witnesses and kept armed men outside the hotel perimeter. Dante surrendered temporary control of Dock 9 to a neutral captain. A costly concession that prevented Enzo from claiming the hearing was merely a succession ambush. Before they entered the ballroom, Dante returned Serena's repaired emerald gown in a garment bag. She chose instead a deep wine-red velvet gown with a practical wrap and low heels. "The green dress belonged to the woman they dragged away," she said. "Tonight they meet the woman who came back." Dante's cold gaze softened only at the edges. "Then I will follow your lead." For a man raised to command, the words were a surrender more intimate than desire. Serena spent the remaining hours rehearsing the hearing with Maya, who attacked every weak inference. The blue pigment could authenticate Lucia's handling, but not a killer. The matching frame fragment established custody at the warehouse, but not who ordered the ambush. Adrian's testimony implicated Enzo in the recent fraud, yet his own betrayal made independent records essential. They cut every claim the documents could not support. Dante listened without interrupting and removed his family's attorney when the man suggested concealing the Moretti manifests. By the time the chandeliers were lit again, Serena's case was narrower than the story Vescari had spread, and far stronger because it admitted what remained unknown. The Bellacourt ballroom reopened without music. 5 family representatives sat among museum lawyers, insurers, and 2 neutral conservators. Vescari arrived with Enzo and the original oak frame. A metal film canister rested in a velvet tray. Dante entered beside Serena, not ahead of her, his injured arm visible in its sling. Serena began with the painting. She established its custody through photographs, condition reports, stretcher marks, and the Bellacourt installation log. Maya testified to Adrian's unauthorized pickup request. The hotel's security director confirmed that Vescari contractors had used forged credentials during the attempted removal. Vescari smiled faintly. "Present inconveniences. Nothing about Lucia Moretti." "Then present the film," Serena said. Enzo carried the tray forward. Serena examined the canister without opening it. Its brass rim bore blue pigment matching Lucia's mark, but the cap had been cleaned recently. She requested the original frame. The missing corner fit the fragment recovered at Dock 9, joining along a distinctive old fracture that placed the frame inside Enzo's controlled warehouse and connected his men to the ambush. Enzo claimed he had rescued it from Adrian. Serena did not argue. She asked him to explain how the film had been stored. "Inside the brass corner," he said. "Where Lucia put it, the room went still." Lucia's catalogue never identified the cavity. Gabriel's conservation note described only silver film inside the frame, and Adrian had seen the corner after Enzo opened it. Enzo could know the exact hiding place only through prior access, or through the person who had removed it before the warehouse trap. It was not enough alone, and Serena did not pretend it was. She presented the duplicate carbon sheets from the blue wall. Their torn registration edges matched the originals in Lucia's catalogue. The port investigators supplied certified Dock 9 manifests bearing Enzo's authorization for the same crate numbers. 3 sources now formed one history: Lucia's inventory, Gabriel's hidden duplicates, and official harbor records. Enzo's composure cracked. He accused Gabriel of taking Vescari's money. Serena produced the receipt and the victim account ledger, verified that afternoon by the bank's archival department. Gabriel had accepted the payment as part of Lucia's controlled purchase. Dante spoke for the first time. "You taught me that my mother died because outsiders envied our power." Enzo looked at him with something almost paternal. "I taught you how to survive. By making grief serve you." Vescari reached for the film canister. Enzo stopped him, revealing the Alliance F fracture. Serena asked the neutral conservators to open it inside a light-safe tent. The developed silver strip held sequential photographs of a meeting at Dock 9. Enzo transferring Lucia S. marked crates to Vescari, followed by an image of Enzo S. car, blocking Lucia S. vehicle on the night she died. The film did not show the crash itself, but it corroborated opportunity and their joint cover-up. Vescari ordered his men forward. None moved. The family representatives had already seen him use a forged debt and false provenance against a recognized dealer. Supporting him now would contaminate their own collections and invite federal seizure. Enzo drew a concealed pistol, not at Dante, but at Serena. Dante stepped into the line despite his injured shoulder. Serena knocked the velvet tray upward. The metal canister struck Enzo's wrist, spoiling his aim. Marco and hotel security subdued him before he fired again. Vescari tried to leave through the service exit where Serena had nearly disappeared hours earlier. The port investigator waited there, with federal art crime officers, whose warrants rested on the modern warehouse attack, forged shipping records, and Adrian S. statement not on mafia authority or theatrical justice. Dante could have killed his uncle in the confusion. Instead, he ordered his men to stand down and let lawful custody take him. That choice cost Dante prestige among captains who equated mercy with weakness. But it ended the lie that violence was the only inheritance his mother had left. When the room emptied, Serena stood beside the veiled saint. Dante placed the purchased debt note on the table between them. "This is the last claim any Moretti will ever make against you," he said. He handed her the match rather than burning it himself. Serena watched the forged signature curl into ash. The ashes did not erase the $10 million Dante had transferred. Under the witnessed rules of the families, Vescari now owed that sum to Moretti. But Dante renounced collection in exchange for the immediate release of every claim against Vale employees and property. The neutral representatives recorded the terms. Serena understood the scale of what he had surrendered. Money mattered less than the precedent that a rival could force him to pay and leave alive. Yet he had chosen a clean boundary over another cycle of retaliation. She did not reward him with instant tenderness. She asked for copies of the agreement and waited while independent counsel confirmed every clause. Dante remained beside her until the final page was sealed, accepting that trust now required documents as well as sacrifice. The arrests did not repair everything. Vescari's network fought the charges, Enzo refused interviews, and several stolen works required years of restitution claims. Adrian pleaded guilty to conspiracy and agreed to identify every forged transfer he had processed. Serena did not ask for the maximum punishment or offer forgiveness. She gave an accurate statement and allowed consequence to exist without becoming revenge. Dante lost 2 waterfront captains after surrendering Dock 9 to neutral control. He closed the art route entirely, returned disputed works through attorneys, and accepted reduced territory rather than rebuild the same machinery under a cleaner name. The decision made him less powerful on paper and more dangerous to enemies who had mistaken restraint for dependence on corruption. Gabriel Vale's name was cleared in Lucia's murder investigation, but Serena refused to turn him into a flawless hero. His secrecy had burdened her with debts and left her vulnerable to men who weaponized half-truths. At his grave, she placed the brass signet against the stone for a moment, then took it home. She could honor his courage without inheriting his silence. 6 weeks later, Vale Gallery opened a private exhibition devoted to recovered works and the hidden labor of provenance researchers. Serena did not display the veiled saint. Its ownership remained under review, and she would not profit from uncertainty simply because the story had made it famous. Maya became managing registrar with authority over every transfer. The gallery adopted dual approval for crate movements and independent verification for emergency frame changes. Serena's business survived because its ordinary routines became stronger, not because a mafia fortune replaced them. Dante stayed away during the opening hours. He had sent no mountain of roses, no public apology, and no expensive object that could be mistaken for another purchase. At 9 that evening, after the last collector left, he appeared alone in a charcoal suit, with his injured arm finally free of the sling. Serena found him studying an empty 18th century frame displayed under soft light. "Most people look at the painting," she said. "I learned that frames remember what men deny." The echo of Lucius' note did not feel like a weapon now. Dante showed Serena a small envelope. Inside was a formal release of every Vescari and Moretti claim attached to Vale Gallery, reviewed by independent counsel. No gift, no hidden condition, only the removal of a threat he had once bought without asking her. "You could have mailed this," she said. "I wanted to ask you something after you were free to refuse." He did not touch her. The distance between them held the memory of the ballroom, the locked archive, and every choice since. "Dinner," he said. "No guards at the table, no debt, no business." Serena considered the man who had purchased her freedom as though power could solve danger. Then surrendered power when he learned it could not create trust. Attraction had been easy. This answer was not. "One dinner," she said, "and Marco may wait outside, because pretending you have no enemies would be stupid." The faintest shift touched Dante's eyes. Not quite a smile agreed. They walked to a small restaurant 3 blocks away, rather than the armored car at the curb. Dante matched his pace to hers. When photographers noticed them, he did not place a claiming hand at her back. Serena chose to take his uninjured hand, feeling the rough edge of his tattoos beneath her fingers. Months passed without a sudden transformation. Dante attended gallery lectures and learned to ask before moving anything. Serena met him in rooms where his name carried fear and refused to become silent decoration. When his captains questioned her presence, he did not announce that she ruled beside him. He told them she spoke for herself and made them listen. The veiled saint was eventually returned to the descendants of the family from whom it had been stolen. Serena supervised the conservation without charging a fee. Before the painting left, she and Dante stood alone before it. "One final time, my mother spent her last years trying to send this home," he said, "and my father made sure her work survived him." Dante turned toward Serena. "What do we make survive us?" She looked at the empty space where the frame would hang after the canvas departed. Freedom was not isolation. It was the right to choose what entered the space one had reclaimed. "Something honest," she said. Slowly, he lifted her hand and waited. Serena closed the distance herself. Their kiss held no audience, no bargain, and no purchased promise. Beyond the dark gallery windows, Manhattan continued trading beauty, power, and secrets inside. The woman once dragged from her own exhibition stood on ground that remained entirely hers and chose the dangerous man who had finally learned that love could never be owned on the anniversary of Lucia's death. Serena joined Dante at the restored blue wall inside Bellacorte. The hotel had preserved a small unmarked section behind glass, not as a monument to crime, but as evidence of how ordinary materials could carry truth. Dante placed no plaque bearing his family name. Serena placed no portrait of Gabriel. They stood with Maya, Marco, and representatives of the families receiving their stolen works, allowing restitution to matter more than legacy. Later, Dante asked whether she regretted returning to the ballroom. Serena looked across the marble floor where strangers had once watched her dragged away. "No," she said, "but I am glad freedom was the beginning of the story, not its ending." This time, when they left together, every door opened because she chose to walk through it.